Beyond the financial implications, another crucial factor that could influence the Lions' decision on Aidan Hutchinson is the evolving nature of modern NFL defenses. Teams across the league are increasingly prioritizing hybrid formations and defensive schemes that emphasize versatility among players. While Hutchinson is an elite talent, his primary strength lies in pass rushing, and his ability to seamlessly adapt to a more dynamic defensive system remains a question. If Detroit's coaching staff envisions a scheme that relies more on fluid, positional shifts and multi-role defenders, then committing long-term to a traditional edge rusher no matter how talented could be a strategic risk. Another critical consideration is the locker room dynamic. Since joining the team, Hutchinson has been more than just a key defensive asset, he has been a leader, both on and off the field. His energy, commitment, and ability to rally teammates have played a crucial role in the Lions' resurgence over the past few seasons. If the team decides to move on from him, they won't just be losing a dominant pass rusher. They will also have to find a new emotional and motivational anchor for their defense. Such transitions can be tricky, and there's always the risk that a lack of leadership presence could affect the team's morale and cohesion. Additionally, the decision to part ways with Hutchinson could have serious repercussions among Lions fans. As a Michigan native and a former standout at the University of Michigan, Hutchinson has built a strong connection with the Detroit fanbase. His departure would likely spark significant backlash, particularly if the team fails to secure a replacement who can match his production and charisma. The emotional component of NFL transactions is often overlooked, but in this case, it could lead to declining fan enthusiasm, affecting everything from ticket sales to team spirit on game days. If the Lions do decide to let Hutchinson go, they will likely explore trade opportunities rather than simply allowing him to walk in free agency. Several teams in dire need of an elite pass rusher, such as the Chicago Bears, Atlanta Falcons, and Denver Broncos, could be willing to offer valuable draft picks or even established players to acquire him. This presents an intriguing dilemma for the Lions. Would it be more beneficial to keep a proven star or use his trade value to address multiple areas of need? The answer largely depends on the team's long-term vision and whether they believe their Super Bowl window is opening or still years away. A potential consequence of moving on from Hutchinson is the developmental impact on the team's younger defensive players. Over the past 2 seasons, he has served as a mentor for emerging talent, helping shape the next generation of Lions defenders. His presence on the field has not only contributed to team success, but has also accelerated the growth of players who have benefited from learning alongside him. Without Hutchinson, the Lions would need to identify a new leader within the defensive ranks, and that transition could take time. If Detroit reallocates the financial resources saved from Hutchinson's contract, one logical investment would be in bolstering the offensive line. Quarterback Jared Goff has been solid under center, but his long-term success depends on maintaining strong protection in the pocket. A reinforced offensive line could enhance both the passing and rushing attack, making the Lions a more complete and balanced offensive unit. Another area that could benefit from financial flexibility is the wide receiver core. While Amon-Ra Brown has established himself as a premier talent, the Lions still lack significant depth at the position. If Jameson Williams fails to live up to expectations or continues to struggle with off-field concerns, the team may need to explore acquiring a top-tier wide receiver either through the draft or free agency. Hutchinson's departure could free up the necessary cap space to make a major move in that direction. From a long-term strategic perspective, the decision on Hutchinson is also tied to the team's salary cap planning for future seasons. If the Lions extend him on a lucrative contract now, it could limit their ability to retain other key players whose deals are set to expire in the coming years. Detroit's front office must weigh whether committing substantial funds to one player is worth potentially sacrificing roster depth and flexibility down the line. If the Lions do choose to move forward without Hutchinson, the pressure on the coaching staff and front office will increase significantly. The decision would need to be justified not just financially, but also in terms of on-field performance. The team would have to demonstrate that they have a clear plan to maintain defensive strength, whether through internal development, strategic free agent signings, or drafting a replacement. If the defense struggles in his absence, the backlash could be overwhelming, and the front office would face heavy scrutiny for letting go of a proven star. Another factor that cannot be overlooked is Hutchinson's durability. Over his tenure with the Lions, he has proven to be a reliable and consistent presence on the field, rarely missing games due to injury. This level of availability is invaluable in a league where attrition often dictates success. If the Lions opt to move on from him, they will need to assess whether any potential replacement, either through the draft or free agency, can provide the same level of reliability. A higher-risk investment in a less durable player could backfire, leaving the team vulnerable in a crucial defensive position. Beyond player personnel, the coaching staff's defensive philosophy will play a significant role in determining Hutchinson's future. If the Lions aim to transition toward a scheme that emphasizes speed and coverage over sheer pass-rushing dominance, then his role could be diminished over time. However, if the team remains committed to a pressure-heavy defense, parting ways with Hutchinson would create an immediate void that may not be easily filled. The challenge for Detroit's front office is ensuring their vision aligns with both their roster and their strategic direction. The financial aspect of retaining Hutchinson also extends beyond just his contract. If the Lions choose to extend him with a blockbuster deal, it could set a precedent for future negotiations with other key defensive players. The ripple effect of one major contract can influence the team's salary cap structure for years, potentially creating difficulties when it comes time to re-sign younger talent. On the other hand, if the Lions take a hardline stance and refuse to meet Hutchinson's demands, it could send a message to other players that Detroit isn't willing to overpay for talent, something that could impact future free agent acquisitions. Hutchinson's departure could also force the Lions to rethink their defensive priorities in the upcoming draft. If they decide to move on, finding a replacement pass rusher would likely become a top priority. While the draft always offers promising young talent, there is never a guarantee that a rookie will seamlessly transition into a dominant NFL player. The front office would need to carefully evaluate whether an early draft pick would be best spent on a defensive end or if other positional needs should take precedence. Another potential downside of moving on from Hutchinson is the impact it could have on defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn's unit. Over the past few seasons, Glenn has built his defensive schemes around Hutchinson's strengths, maximizing his pass rushing ability to disrupt opposing quarterbacks. If the Lions trade or release Hutchinson, Glenn may need to adjust his entire defensive philosophy, which could create growing pains in the short term. Stability in defensive personnel often correlates with sustained success, and any major shakeup carries inherent risks. If Detroit does opt to trade Hutchinson, the timing of such a move will be critical. Making a decision too early could limit their negotiating leverage, while waiting too long might reduce the number of interested teams. The Lions must also consider whether they would prefer draft capital or established players in return. A trade that brings in multiple assets could help build a more well-rounded team. But losing an elite pass rusher could still leave an undeniable gap on the field. The psychological aspect of losing a player like Hutchinson also needs to be considered. Players often talk about the importance of continuity and trust within a locker room. And when a cornerstone player departs, it can create a sense of instability. Teammates who have built relationships with Hutchinson may struggle to adjust, especially if they perceive the move as a purely financial decision rather than a strategic one. Keeping a tight-knit group together can be just as valuable as acquiring new talent, and the Lions must weigh that factor carefully. From a competitive standpoint, the potential departure of Hutchinson could alter how opposing teams prepare for the Lions' defense. Right now, offenses must game plan around his presence, often assigning extra blockers to neutralize his impact. If he's no longer in Detroit, opponents may feel less pressure, allowing them to focus more on attacking other weaknesses within the Lions' defensive scheme. Losing that kind of disruptive force could have far-reaching consequences that extend beyond just sack totals. If the Lions ultimately let Hutchinson go, they will have to ensure that their alternative plan is not just financially sound, but also defensively viable. Whether it's through a trade, free agency, or the draft, they must have a clear and executable strategy in place before making such a monumental decision. Simply freeing up cap space without a concrete plan could leave them in a worse position, both in terms of talent and overall team morale. It's also important to acknowledge that in the NFL, personnel decisions aren't solely based on talent. Factors like personality fit, locker room harmony, and alignment with the franchise's long-term vision all play a role. If the Lions ultimately decide to part ways with Hutchinson, it won't just be about financial savings or on-field performance. It will be a reflection of how they see the team evolving over the next several years. However, whether that vision aligns with the expectations of fans, players, and even ownership remains to be seen. Hutchinson's situation isn't just a contract debate. It's a defining moment for the future of the Detroit Lions. Will they choose stability and continuity, keeping their defensive cornerstone for years to come? Or will they take a bold risk, reshaping their identity in pursuit of a broader, long-term vision? With the deadline approaching, every decision the front office makes will be scrutinized, and the fate of Hutchinson could very well define the trajectory of this franchise for the foreseeable future.